The shy waitress greeted the Mafia boss's deaf father. But what she said in sign language left everyone speechless. Subscribe now, or this might be our last meeting. Follow, comment, and share to stay connected. Don't miss out. Let's dive in. The crystal chandeliers of La Rosa Nera cast amber shadows across the marble columns, illuminating a room where men made fortunes and broke bones with the same well-manicured hands. As Renee Bray smoothed her black vest for the third time that evening, her hands remained perfectly steady, not from confidence in serving the city's most dangerous men, but from the rigid discipline of survival that had replaced fear long ago. She wasn't worried about dropping a tray or forgetting an order. She was worried about being seen. At 26, she had mastered the art of existing without living, moving through the restaurant like a shadow that happened to carry wine. Invisibility wasn't just her strategy, it was her coffin, and she had buried herself alive to escape the man who had already killed her once. Table 7 needs their antipasti, called Anne, the head waitress, her voice dropping to a warning whisper as she passed. And Renee, don't make eye contact with the Mirandas tonight. Ramon's been watching the room like a wolf since he walked in. His father's with him. The old man. They say he hasn't spoken to anyone outside the family in years. Renee nodded, gathering the bottle of Barolo that cost more than she made in a month. Her fingers didn't tremble. They never did anymore. Ramon Miranda. Even his name sounded like a threat whispered in dark alleys. Old blood, old money, old violence. The kind of power that made people disappear. She'd been serving his table for 3 months now, and he'd never once looked at her as anything more than a piece of furniture. A ghost in a uniform. The dining room hummed with the quiet conversations of men who never worried about witness protection, about biometric scanners, about whether the man who stole your life would finally find you hiding in plain sight. Renee knew that danger intimately. She just prayed Paul Gaines didn't know it too. Renee moved through La Rosa Nera like breath on glass, present, then gone, leaving no trace. She had learned to make herself small in doorways, silent in kitchens, forgettable in rooms where billionaires negotiated lives and deaths between courses of osso buco. The restaurant was a theater of power, and she was the perfect stagehand, invisible, efficient, utterly unmemorable. Her mind worked in algorithms she never spoke aloud. Table 4 would want the check in 4 minutes. She knew by how the man kept checking his gold Patek Philippe. The couple at 9 were fighting. The wife's left hand had curled into a fist beneath the linen. The politician at 12 was sweating through his Botox. Which meant the FBI rumors were true. She calculated percentages, predicted needs, noticed the micro-expressions that others missed, all while wearing a smile that reached her eyes but never her soul.
Good evening, here is your wine.
This intelligence had built
Enjoy your
financial
meal.
models worth millions. Now it ensured she survived another shift without being remembered. Ramon Miranda occupied the corner table like a throne. 6'2", black suit tailored to his shoulders like armor, eyes the color of wet stone. He was 40, maybe 45, with the stillness of a man who had ordered violence the way others ordered coffee. When he moved, the room adjusted around him. Waiters found other tables, conversations dropped to whispers. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim in deference. He owned the building, the block, the judge who approved the permits. Half the city worked for him, the other half feared they soon would. But tonight, Ramon's attention kept drifting to the elderly man beside him. Mr. Asher sat with the careful posture of the deaf, his hands resting on the white tablecloth like sleeping birds. Ramon's father. The only person in the world who could make the wolf look like a son. Renee watched him lean in, adjust his father's water glass, position himself between the old man and the room. Protection, not possession. The distinction mattered
Excuse me,
somehow.
is the salmon
She
fresh
delivered
today?
their antipasti
Yes, sir, it
without
was
meeting
delivered this
anyone's
morning.
eyes, retreating
Perfect, I'll have
before the
that.
silence could notice her. In the kitchen, and touched her shoulder. You okay? You look dead on your feet. Renee smiled, the practiced one, the ghost smile. Just tired. Lies came easier than truth now. The truth was that she had forgotten what it felt like to be tired. Fatigue implied a self that needed rest, and Renee Bray had no self left, only reflexes, only vigilance, only the endless calculation of how to occupy space without claiming it. She was safe here in her coffin of invisibility. She was suffocating here. Both things were true, and neither could be spoken, so she straightened her vest and stepped back into the amber light, ready to be nobody for a few hours more. Mr. Asher raised his hand, a gesture sharp with frustration, but the server passing by saw only the empty space where sound should be and moved on. Renee noticed from across the room, the rigid shoulders, the careful way he positioned himself to read lips that never turned his way, the loneliness of a man surrounded by voices he couldn't access. She moved before she could think better of it. When she reached his table, she didn't speak. Her hands rose, fingers shaping the air with a fluency that felt like remembering a language she'd forgotten she knew. "Good evening. My name is Renee. I'm honored to serve you tonight." Mr. Asher froze. His eyes, cloudy with age but sharp with intelligence, widened as comprehension broke across his face like dawn. For a moment he simply stared, as if she had performed magic rather than courtesy. Then his hands responded, trembling slightly with emotion. "You sign." "You actually sign." "I do," she answered. "What can I bring you?" Delight transformed him, not the polite mask of the wealthy, but something raw and childlike. "My son thinks I am difficult," he signed, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I am merely particular. But you, young lady, have already exceeded expectations." Ramon Miranda had gone completely still. Across the room, his wine glass hung forgotten in his hand, his stone-cold eyes fixed on the scene unfolding at his table. The wolf had spotted something that didn't belong in his forest, a waitress who spoke his father's silent language. Who made the old man laugh with hands rather than words. Staff had become mystery. Furniture had become woman. In the far corner, a camera flashed, brief as lightning, capturing the moment a ghost became visible. Paul Gaines lowered his phone, zooming in on the image, his smile thinning as recognition sparked. There she was. Anna Martinez, alive and signing secrets to a Mafia don's father. The hunt, long cold, suddenly burned again. Renee felt the attention like heat on her skin, Ramon's scrutiny, dangerous and new, and something else, something wrong, a prickle at her neck that whispered of eyes that knew her true name. She kept her hands steady, her smile gentle, but something cracked inside her armor, a fissure of fear and, worse, hope. Mr. Asher reached out, touching her wrist in silent thanks, and for the first time in 2 years, Renee Bray felt seen. The kitchen door swung shut behind her, and he was there. Ramon Miranda filled the narrow corridor like a shadow given weight, his shoulders blocking the light from the prep station. Renee's tray clattered to the stainless steel counter, the sound of her composure shattering, and appeared from the steam of the dish pit, wiping her hands. "Sir, this area is staff only, it's fine, Anne." Renee's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Give us a moment," and looked between them, reading something dangerous in the man's stillness, but she withdrew. The door swung closed, leaving Renee alone with the wolf. "Where did you learn sign language?" His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "University." The word escaped before she could cage it. "What university?" "Linguistics program." "Another life." She retreated until her back hit the cold refrigerator. "I should go. What else do you hide behind that uniform, Renee Bray?" He stepped closer, not threatening, but inevitable, like gravity. "Because you don't belong here. You never have." Panic rose in her throat, metallic and familiar. He had noticed. They always noticed eventually. She folded her arms across her chest, the universal posture of refusal. Ramon studied her, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he stepped back, creating space she didn't trust. "This conversation isn't over," he said. And the promise sounded like a threat wrapped in silk. "It will continue when you're ready. Or when I am." He left through the service entrance. Renee stood trembling in the fluorescent hum, fear and something worse, interest, the dangerous spark of being seen, warring in her chest. The kitchen door swung shut behind her, and he was there. Ramon Miranda filled the narrow corridor like a shadow given weight, his shoulders blocking the light from the prep station. Renee's tray clattered to the stainless steel counter, the sound of her composure shattering, and appeared from the steam of the dish pit, wiping her hands. "Sir, this area is staff only, it's fine, Anne." Renee's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Give us a moment," and looked between them, reading something dangerous in the man's stillness, but she withdrew. The door swung closed, leaving Renee alone with the wolf. Where did you learn sign language? His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. University. The word escaped before she could cage it. What university? Linguistics program. Another life. She retreated until her back hit the cold refrigerator. I should go. What else do you hide behind that uniform, Renee Bray? He stepped closer, not threatening, but inevitable, like gravity. Because you don't belong here. You never have. Panic rose in her throat, metallic and familiar. He had noticed. They always noticed eventually. She folded her arms across her chest, the universal posture of refusal. Ramon studied her, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he stepped back, creating space she didn't trust. This conversation isn't over, he said. And the promise sounded like a threat wrapped in silk. It will continue when you're ready. Or when I am. He left through the service entrance. Renee stood trembling in the fluorescent hum, fear and something worse, interest, the dangerous spark of being seen, warring in her chest. His security detail had vanished, giving them privacy that felt dangerous and deliberate. Renee looked at this man, mafia, violence, power, and saw not a predator, but a mirror. Two strategists who had survived destruction by becoming weapons themselves. Vulnerability isn't trust, she warned. No, he agreed. But it's a beginning. The river moved beneath them, indifferent to their confessions. But something had shifted. Renee felt it in her chest, the first crack in her coffin, light seeping through. The conference room on the 47th floor smelled of new leather and old money. Paul Gaines sat across from Ramon, his smile calibrated to project confidence without arrogance, his suit Italian, his watch understated but expensive. He looked like a man who had never had to bury his own secrets. Ramon knew better. Erica stood by the window, her tablet glowing, her eyes cataloging every micro-expression. So the algorithm's performance has exceeded projections, Paul was saying, spreading his hands in a gesture of humble triumph. We're looking at 400 million in the first quarter alone. Ramon steepled his fingers. Impressive. Your own creation, years of development. Paul's smile didn't waver. Blood, sweat, and considerable tears. Anna Martinez. Ramon let the name drop like a stone into still water. Ring a bell. The silence lasted exactly 1 second too long. Paul's blink was mechanical, his recovery seamless. The name sounds familiar. Study group, maybe? Poor girl had some trouble with the law, didn't she? Embezzlement, fraud. Tragic when brilliance lacks moral foundation. Tragic, Ramon agreed, his voice neutral as a blade before it cuts. Erica's tablet chimed. She glanced down, and her face went still. She crossed to Ramon, leaned close, showed him the screen. A photograph. Renee at La Rosanera, hands shaping sign language, face turned toward an elderly man. The timestamp was tonight. The sender was Paul Gaines's private server. Ramon looked up. Paul was watching him, the smile finally reaching his eyes, the eyes of a man who had spotted weakness and moved to exploit it. You know, Paul said softly, I always wondered if she survived. Some rats are harder to drown than others. Ramon stood. He buttoned his jacket with deliberate precision, the gesture a man makes before violence. Mr. Gaines, I believe our partnership is about to undergo restructuring. Paul's confidence faltered, just slightly. Ramon, we're talking about 400 million. Don't let sentiment get out of my building. The words were quiet. The threat was not. And Paul? If you go near her again, I'll show you what real drowning looks like. Erica was already dialing security. Paul rose, smoothing his tie, but his hands trembled. At the door, he paused. She's a ghost, Ramon. Ghosts don't stay saved. When he was gone, Ramon stared at the photograph, Renee's hands mid-gesture, her face illuminated by connection rather than fear. His hands curled into fists. The cold fury of a protective predator settled into his bones, familiar as blood. The alliance was sealed now, not by choice, but by war. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors, all glass and shadow, with the city spread beneath them like an offering. Renee stood at the window, counting exits, memorizing sightlines, her old habit screaming that this was capture disguised as rescue. "For your safety," Ramon had said, but his eyes had said mine. Erica arrived at dawn with coffee and files, her efficiency masking enthusiasm that surprised them both. "Your recursive modeling approach," she said, spreading printouts across the marble island, "is elegant. Brutal, but elegant. I have questions." They talked for hours, strategist to strategist, while Ramon watched from the doorway, something like pride in his expression. Renee felt herself unfolding, muscle by muscle, the scholar she had buried reaching toward light, and came at dusk, a paper bag of Renee's meager possessions clutched to her chest. She scanned the penthouse with the eyes of a woman who had served the wealthy too long. "Be careful, Renee. Men like him consume people like us. They call it protection until it becomes possession. He's different," Renee said, not sure she believed it. "They're all different," and replied, "until they're not." She left without looking back. That night, Renee found Ramon on the terrace, the wind tugging at his collar. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "that I've traded one prison for another. One controlling man for another." He turned, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in the wolf, the uncertainty of a man who had learned power before he learned trust. "I don't want to own you," he said. "I want to help you burn down the man who tried to. After that, you can walk away. I won't stop you, and if I want to stay, then we negotiate." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his heat through the chill air. "Like equals. Like allies," he asked permission with his eyes. She answered by closing the distance. The kiss was careful, deliberate, two people accustomed to weaponizing their bodies learning gentleness. When they broke apart, his hand cradled her jaw, thumb tracing her cheekbone, and she felt the shift, not possession, but partnership. Terror and desire braided together, indistinguishable. Trust, she realized, was not a feeling but a choice. An act of war against everything Paul had taught her about power. She chose it. The gala glittered like a trap, which it was. Paul had chosen the venue well: cameras, crowds, the impossibility of screaming without becoming entertainment. Renee walked through the revolving doors alone, her dress borrowed, her spine steel. Around her, Ramon's security moved like ghosts in tuxedos. Outside, Mr. Asher sat in the armored car, hands folded, refusing to be left behind. Paul waited by the champagne fountain, smiling. "You look lovely, Anna. Or do you prefer Renee? The dead have so many names." She didn't flinch. "I brought you something." The files unspooled across the mahogany bar, original patents with her biometric signatures, metadata trails showing Paul accessing her servers months before the theft. Emails coordinating with men whose job was to make women disappear. His mask cracked, the smooth executive dissolving into something frantic and feral. "You think this changes anything? I'll bury you. I'll bury everyone you." The doors exploded inward. Ramon entered with federal agents on his left, Miranda enforcers on his right, legitimate and illegitimate power converging like wings. Paul shrank, calculating exits, finding none. Renee stepped forward, into the light, into the cameras, into the name she had buried. "My name is Anna Martinez," she said, and her voice didn't shake. "And you will never make me disappear again." The ghost had become flesh. The mouse had roared. And for the first time in 2 years, she breathed without counting exits. 6 months later, the morning light hit the penthouse differently. It came through windows that no longer felt like observation posts, pooling across the kitchen island where Renee sat in Ramon's shirt, reading headlines on her tablet. Paul Gaines had pleaded guilty to 17 federal counts, his empire dismantled, his name synonymous with fraud. The Miranda family's quieter justice had been less public but more permanent. She didn't ask for details. Some ghosts deserved their graves. Ramon entered from the terrace, coffee in hand, his free hand finding her shoulder automatically, a touch that had become habit, then language. They had learned each other slowly, two strategists accustomed to defense discovering that vulnerability could be shelter. Mr. Asher sat at the breakfast table, buttering toast with the careful precision of a man who had spent decades navigating a hearing world. He looked up as they approached, and his hands moved in the private grammar they now shared. "Good morning, children. Today I teach you family." Renee settled beside him, her fingers shaping the signs with the fluency she had reclaimed. "Show me." Erica arrived at 9, as always, her tablet displaying projections that no longer made Renee's stomach clench. The algorithm, her algorithm, rebuilt from encrypted fragments and memory, now predicted crop yields in drought regions, medical supply needs in refugee camps, financial instability in developing economies. Profit through service, Ramon had insisted, and she had learned that power could be a tool rather than a weapon, and sends her regards, Erica reported, smiling. She's hired 3 more former service workers for the new office. Says she'll never let anyone be invisible on her watch. Renee thought of her friend, now head of operations at Martinez Analytics, her practical wisdom guiding a company built on second chances. The woman who had warned her about men like Ramon now accepted his investment checks and challenged his assumptions in equal measure. Family, Renee was learning, came in forms you didn't expect. Mr. Asher tapped her wrist, recalling her attention. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, teaching the sign for home, not a building, but a gathering, people choosing each other. "This," he signed, gesturing to the 3 of them, "is home." Ramon's hand found hers under the table, his thumb tracing the calluses she had earned rebuilding her life. She had been Anna Martinez, destroyed. Renee Bray, surviving. Now she was becoming something new, something chosen rather than inherited. The city sprawled below them, indifferent and magnificent. Renee no longer counted exits. She no longer calculated survival in hours. She had built something, company, partnership, family, and the building had become the belonging. Yes, she signed to Mr. Asher, and to Ramon, and to herself. Home. He didn't choose a restaurant, though they had shared many meals. He didn't choose the terrace with its view of the city they had fought to claim. Instead, Ramon waited until dawn, until the apartment held only the hush of early light and the distant hum of a waking metropolis. He sat across from her at the kitchen island, not kneeling, not performing, but present in the way he had learned she needed most. The document between them was thick, bound in leather the color of dried blood. A prenuptial agreement, but unlike any she had seen. Clauses protecting her assets, her identity, her right to leave with everything intact. Provisions for her company, her employees, her future children, should she want them, to inherit regardless of marital status. A fortress built of legal language, designed to ensure she could never be erased again. "I can't give you a normal life," he said, his voice rough with the vulnerability he still struggled to show. "But I can give you a protected one. I can give you my name, my resources, and my word that you will never be invisible again." He paused, his hand covering hers where it rested on the counter. "Marry me, Anna. Or Renee. Or whoever you choose to be. Just stay." Renee looked at this man, mafia, violence, power, and saw not a cage, but a bridge. He had learned her language, literal and metaphorical. He had stood beside her in the fire and not been consumed. He had offered protection without possession. Partnership without erasure. She thought of Mr. Asher in the next room, sleeping finally, his deafness no longer isolation but connection. She thought of and building her empire of second chances, of Erica's fierce loyalty, of the family they had assembled from survivors and strategists and unexpected kindness. Her hands rose, shaping the air with the fluency she had reclaimed, the private grammar that had started everything. "Yes," she signed. "I see you. I choose you." He pulled her across the counter, papers scattering, coffee cooling, the world narrowing to this touch, this promise, this beginning built on ashes. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers, their breath mingling. "Anna Miranda," he whispered, testing the name. "Or Renee," she said, smiling. "Or whoever I choose to be, endings are beginnings. Survival is merely the first chapter of living." And Anna Martinez, who had been Renee Bray, who would become Anna Miranda, or perhaps something else entirely, something not yet imagined, was finally, fully, irrevocably ready to be seen.